Okay, Chapter 6, A Surprise, Sort of. Howie, who was beginning to wish his Uncle Hobart would go back to Saudi Arabia so he could sleep in his own room again, brought his bicycle and unicycle over to the Quimby's every day after school. Beezus never again objected to Ramona's riding around the block. Ramona thought how lonely she would be without Howie if she had to go live in the land of sheep. "Maybe we will move away to southeastern Oregon," she confided to him. "Hey, that would be neat," said Howie. "They have wild horses down there. Maybe you could send me one." Ramona was offended. Howie wouldn't even miss her. "I wouldn't send you one even if I could catch it," she informed him. Howie understood. "I didn't mean I wouldn't miss you," he said. "I only meant if you have to leave and if catching a horse would be easy." Since no more offers of a teaching position arrived, no matter how often the family looked in the mailbox, Ramona saw that moving from Klickitat Street was a very real possibility. One afternoon, before Howie arrived, the telephone rang. Ramona beat Beezus to answering it. "Ramona?" It was Willa Jean. "Willa Jean!" Ramona was astonished. "I didn't know you knew how to dial the phone." "Uncle Hobart showed me," explained Willa Jean. "Ramona, come back and play with me, please. It's lonesome here with just Grandma." Ramona felt sad and guilty. "I'm sorry, Willa Jean, I can't. Maybe your Uncle Hobart can play with you." "He's not around much," said Willa Jean. "He has a girlfriend. And anyway, he's a grown-up." "I know," said Ramona, meaning she knew he was a grown-up and not that he had a girlfriend. "Goodbye." Willa Jean, who had nothing more to say, hung up. Ramona sighed. She remembered what it was like to be the littlest child in the neighborhood. She remembered all too well the days back in kindergarten when she was known as Ramona the Pest. Maybe she could ask Howie to bring Willa Jean over to play sometime when her mother stopped working. Nursery school had done Willa Jean a world of good, and as all the grown-ups except Mrs. Kemp said, Mrs. Kemp thought Willa Jean was perfect to begin with. On the bus the next morning, Ramona sat beside Howie. "Willa Jean said your Uncle Hobart has a girlfriend." "Yeah," Howie wasn't much interested. Some teacher." A terrible suspicion crossed Ramona's mind. "What teacher?" she asked. "I don't know," said Howie. "He acts like it's a big secret. Maybe she has two heads or something." Ramona was silent all the way to school. She had that sinking feeling she always felt when she rode down in an elevator. She just knew that Howie's uncle was seeing her aunt. She didn't know why she knew, but she knew. After school, Ramona confided her fears to her sister, who said, "Oh, I don't think that could be. Aunt Beatrice and Uncle Hobart?" She spoke so doubtfully that Ramona knew Beezus thought she might be right. "Maybe that's what the big secret is, that Mom doesn't want us to know, because she knows we don't like Uncle Hobart. She thinks we might say something to Aunt Beatrice." "Oh well," said Ramona, "he'll have to go back to Saudi Arabia sometime, and then we'll be rid of him." "I wonder what happened to Michael," Beezus thought aloud. Then, one Sunday, Mrs. Quimby told the girls to set out 2 extra places at the table for dinner after church. "Who's coming?" asked Ramona. "Your Aunt Bee and a friend." Mrs. Quimby was smiling. "What friend?" demanded both girls. "Oh, just a friend," answered their maddening mother. "A man?" asked Beezus. "Girls, I really don't have time to play guessing games." Mrs. Quimby turned her attention to something on the stove. "It's a man." Ramona was positive. "It's Howie's uncle." Mrs. Quimby looked startled. "How did you know?" "Oh, a little bird told me." Ramona tried to sound as annoying as any grown-up. Beezus was indignant. "You mean Aunt Bee is bringing that awful man here? How did she meet him?" He remembered her from high school and asked Howie's mother about her. She called to ask if I thought my sister remembered him, and I said she did. So he phoned her, and now they're coming to dinner. So that was what the mysterious phone calls were all about, thought Ramona. But she said, "Well, he better not spit around here." "You behave yourself," said Mrs. Quimby, and she meant it. Ramona made sure she answered the door when the guests arrived. There they stood, Aunt Bee and Uncle Hobart. "Good evening, Ramona." Uncle Hobart, who had grown a neat beard and was wearing a jacket and tie, spoke to Ramona as if they were all the same age. Ramona was blunt. "Mr. Kemp, how come you're still here?" Nobody would catch her calling him Uncle Hobart, even though because of Howie this was the way she thought of him. "Ramona!" Mrs. Quimby's voice had a warning. "Come on in," she said to the couple. "Don't pay attention to Ramona." Aunt Bee laughed and said to Ramona, "Hobart and I have renewed our high school friendship." "Does he still spit?" Ramona asked under her breath, hoping her mother wouldn't hear. "Not on the carpet," said Uncle Hobart under his breath. Mrs. Quimby had heard. "Ramona, do you want to go to your room?" "No." Ramona sulked. Aunt Bee would be sorry if the family moved off to the land of sheep. Where would she go for Thanksgiving and Christmas? Her imagination spun a sad picture of Aunt Bee alone in her apartment, eating a frozen chicken pie. When dinner was served, Ramona was seated across from Uncle Hobart. While the adults talked and laughed, she stared at her plate until a lull came into the conversation, when she asked as politely as she could under the circumstances, "Mr. Kemp, I expect you'll be going back to Saudi Arabia soon?" He smiled a very nice smile. "What's the matter, Ramona? Are you trying to get rid of me?" Ramona looked down at her plate. "As a matter of fact, I'm not going to Saudi Arabia at all," Uncle Hobart informed Ramona. "I'm going to Alaska." Well, at least he was going someplace. "That's why I grew a beard," he explained. "Alaska is cold in winter and full of mosquitoes in summer." "Oh," said Ramona. "Of course women can't grow beards, so they scratch a lot in summer," said Uncle Hobart. Ramona refused to laugh. When dessert had been eaten by everyone except Mrs. Quimby, who was careful about calories, and the adults were drinking coffee, Ramona was about to ask to be excused when Uncle Hobart spoke directly to her. "Ramona," he said, "how would you like to have me for an uncle?" Ramona felt her face grow red. She was surprised and puzzled by the question. She wanted to say, "No, thank you." Of course, grown-ups would think her rude, so she said, "Well, you're already Howie and Willa Jean's uncle." "I would like to have a couple of ready-made nieces," said Uncle Hobart. Ramona had not caught on. "But how could you be our uncle?" she asked. "Nothing to it," said Uncle Hobart. "All I have to do is marry your Aunt Beatrice." Ramona sank back in her chair and thought, "How dumb can I get?" Aunt Bee was trying to hide her laughter, which did not make Ramona feel any better. "You mean—" began Beezus. Aunt Bee burst out laughing. "Hobart and I are getting married in 2 weeks before we leave for Alaska. There's oil in Alaska too, you know." What do you think Ramona's going to say about that? We'll find out next time. Have a good day.